So that brings us up to the Ready Nevada County dashboard, and Lieutenant Jacobs is going to take the reins on that, and he has got his our IT expert Lindsay Gordon online with him, and they'll lead us through the dashboard. So, Bob, the meeting's yours.
Great, thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. Thank you for having us on this evening. Yeah, again, it's Bob Jacobs, Sheriff's Lieutenant here in OES, and the county's Emergency Operations Coordinator. I was invited tonight to speak to you all about our new Ready Nevada County dashboard. I say it's new, but now it's probably close to 2 months old, and it's already seen its first live deployment. Hopefully everybody on here is somewhat familiar with that. If not, we're going to get you familiar with it tonight. Like Bob said, I'm also joined tonight not only by Paul Cummings, our OES program manager, but also Lindsay Gordon. She's an analyst here for the county. She works in our GIS department, and she's pretty much the master architect of the Ready Nevada County dashboard. So she's kind of my backup tonight. So she's here to help keep me honest. I'm going to do a run through the dashboard and go through all the features, but if I call something a widget and it's not, then hopefully she's here to pipe up and like I said, keep me honest and make sure that I'm using all the correct terminology. She's our super wizard for the dashboard. So if I can, let me try to share my screen here so that everybody can see the dashboard. All right, let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so as you can see, we have the dashboard up. It is called our Ready Nevada County dashboard. This was a collaborative effort between OES and our first response partners, both in the fire departments and the local law enforcement agencies. We developed this tool initially as a way to visualize what's going on during an incident as far as it relates to evacuations. But as you can see, this tool kind of grew in scope over time. As we developed this tool, a number of people had great input for us, and we decided to kind of build this tool out a bit in line with what OES considers all seasons, all hazards. You'll notice that there's a number of different tabs up at the top of this dashboard. It is not specifically geared for just wildfire. Initially, when we were developing this tool, that was the idea, was to give the public a map to where they could see the evacuation zones and see some roadblocks. But we decided to just continue to add to it. It seemed like every time we got together to talk about the dashboard, we decided to add something new to it, just to continue to give the public even more information. It was already brought up, the Ready, Set, Go campaign. If you think about it, this tool really does embody Ready, Set, Go. It has tools to meet each one of those sections of the Ready, Set, Go. It's got information in here on how to pre-plan for your evacuations. So it's that ready part. It's got set in here so that you can see what the current conditions are, so that you can up your situational awareness and understand what's happening around you. And then it's also got the go component as well. If and when there's evacuation orders or warnings that are issued, those will populate here, and then you can act on that. So again, Ready, Set, Go. It worked out really well with that campaign. So I want to go ahead and start out with the dashboard. Right now, I know I've got up the wildfire and evacuation incident dashboard tab, but I want to start with the other tabs first because there's a lot going on with this one. So I want to start with some other tabs first. You'll notice that immediately to the right of the wildfire and evacuation incident dashboard tab, we have the live fire webcams. You click on that tab, that's going to pull up a map that's centered. And it's got these little black triangles here that are directional, essentially. Those are cameras that are situated all throughout Western United States. There's hundreds of these cameras in a network. If you're familiar with Alert Wildfire, many of those cameras are on this same network here. We get this feed through Cal OES. Like I said, it's very similar to Alert Wildfire. So if you're used to that program, then you'll see a lot of similarities here. You'll notice that on the map, the first thing I did was I clicked in the upper left-hand corner here, there's this blue square. If you click that square with your mouse, then that's going to give you the ability to select any of these black directional icons here And what that does is that activates a camera. So you can see that I clicked this camera here, and over on the right, it brought up the viewing window of the Loman Ridge camera. So this is a camera that's looking south through Nevada County, and you can see it here. Beautiful clear skies, a lot less smoke than we saw a few days ago. You can zoom in on the map using your mouse ball, or you can use the plus and minus down here to zoom in and zoom out. And like I said, you can zoom into Grass Valley here, and you can see some of the cameras that are situated in and around Grass Valley. You can select those cameras. I just selected Banner Mountain. And you'll notice here that above the label here, Banner Mountain, you have one of two with these arrows. So that tells you right away that there's more than one camera at this site. So if you click one of these arrows, it'll change your view. It'll go from the first camera to the next camera. So you can toggle back and forth. If I zoom out here, we can probably see. All right, if I zoom back in, notice up here, just south of Quincy, all these little red dots. So what these red dots are, these are hotspots. So this is coming from the Modus Thermal Hotspot satellite system. And it's showing you on here where there's potentially fire activity. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a fire, but it's giving you an indication of where there's hotspots. So if you're just cruising around on this map and you're looking to try to spot something, you can certainly look around for those hotspots and see if the camera is going to pick anything up. So again, down here, if I zoom in, we've got a couple of cameras that appear to be situated on a hotspot. I click on this camera and you see it's full of smoke. So it gives you kind of an indicator or a pointer as to where there may be some fire activity through the state. If that's what you're looking to do, is look for wildfire. If you want a real in-depth on how to use this system, we have a how-to section on the left-hand side of the pane. You can read through that and it'll tell you exactly how to use this tool. And it also tells you the data source of where we're getting this information. Moving on, the next tab to the right is our current weather tab. This is going to pull up a split screen from windy.com. Two different viewing panes. The idea was to give people an indication of wind, but also of heat. So you'll see on the left-hand side here, this one here is designed more to give you indications on temperature. You can zoom in here, you can see Grass Valley. Zoom in close enough. You'll also see it's not only giving you the temperatures, but it's also showing you relative wind direction. Same thing on the right-hand side. You have all the same features of zooming in. You can see the wind direction. What I really like is if I click on it here, if I click on Grass Valley, give it a second, it pops up Grass Valley, and then you'll see down here below, it actually gives you a forecast. And this forecast includes not only the temperatures, but it's also showing you an indication of the direction of the wind. So it'll forecast for you which direction the wind is going to be, say, tomorrow or the next day. If we have an active fire and you're wanting to know which way the fire may turn depending on wind, you can potentially come here and you can get a sense for which direction the wind's going to be blowing over the next few days. Moving on, air quality info. So this tab was modified recently during the Jones fire. We were getting some feedback from the public wanting to know what the quality of the air was, how unhealthy was the air that we were breathing. So Lindsay in GIS, she took in that feedback and she was able to change this tab. And now this tab defaults and it goes to Northern Sierra Air Quality Management District's air quality info page. Normally, like I said, in line with the ready portion of Ready, Set, Go, this gives you burn day status. So it gives you an indication as to whether or not today's a burn day or is tomorrow going to be a burn day. It gives you information on how to get burn permits for Nevada County as well as surrounding counties. It's a great website to come to if you're looking to see how bad is the air today or how bad is the air projected to be for tomorrow. Moving on, Evacuation Route Pre-Planner tab. Again, this is another tab in line with the idea of ready. This is where we want folks to come way ahead of time. This is where we want you to come to build out your evacuation plan. You'll notice that when you click on it, a big rectangle disclaimer pops up. We really want folks to read this disclaimer This disclaimer explains that this tool is not intended to be used during an emergency, that we want you to come here before any emergency actually exists and use this as a resource to figure out 3 different ways out of your neighborhood. We don't want folks to come here during an incident because we're not planning on pushing information about a fire or an emergency incident to this tab. We will be putting that information in the wildfire and evacuation incident dashboard tab. But this disclaimer talks about how they want you to find 3 ways out of your neighborhood and that it's a good idea to be familiar with those roads. Don't just use the map and map out your 3 ways out, but actually take the information that you develop from this plan and go out and actually drive those routes. We say evacuate often. We want you to go out and practice these routes. And don't just do it during the day when the weather is perfect. Do it at night when it's dark. Remember, you may be evacuating during times where there could be a fire nearby and it could be smoky conditions, and it could be really affecting your visibility in the area. We want you to practice these routes at all times, day and night. So what we ask you to do is click that you agree to the above terms and conditions after you've read them, and then click on OK, and that'll give you the ability to now start using this tool. You'll notice that as I zoom in and out, it brings our county closer. What we've done is we've highlighted the main arteries throughout the county in dark black. What this is that we're trying to draw your attention to those routes that we want you to eventually wind up on, a main artery where you can get out of your neighborhood. It's those small little routes that we need you to find. So as you zoom into the map, you'll notice that these smaller roads become more clear. It'll show you all the little streets so that you can actually figure out different ways in and out of your neighborhood. One of the quickest ways is just to type in an address. So I'll type in the Route Center's address. And you'll see that the drop down, as I start typing in an address, the drop down appears and it shows me possible addresses. I'm looking for the Route Center, which is in Nevada City at 950 Maidu Avenue. When I click on it, it automatically takes my map directly to that and it centers that location in the map. Now I can grab the map with my mouse and I can move it around to look at the surrounding streets. I can zoom in and out. This is where we want folks to really concentrate on those potential evacuation routes in and out of their neighborhood. There's a number of tools that are built into this tab itself that will help you figure out how to best utilize this tab. We have a little icon here. If you click it, directions, this is where you can type in your address and then type in a location that you want to go. So we talk about being ready, find your 5, having those alternate locations that you're going to go to during an emergency. This is where you can type in those addresses and it'll show you varying routes, and you can change your route. It'll show you how long it might take you to get there, and then you can actually grab those routes and you can move them and you can change them. So again, we want you to try to find 3 locations out of your neighborhood if possible. We understand that not every neighborhood's gonna possibly have 3 routes, but really that's the goal, is to find 3 different routes. So please come here to this tab, learn how to use this tab, spend some time diving into the information section of this. We have a great tutorial here that speaks about how to use this tool. There's a number of great little resources that are built in here. But you really do need to come here and spend some time with it. So again, it's a pre-planning tool. Moving on here, the next tab over is PG&E PSPS. Again, we talk about this dashboard as being an all hazards, all seasons tool. We're rapidly approaching time when we may experience more PG&E public safety power shutoffs. This is where folks can come during a public safety power shutoff to get information about that shutoff itself. You'll see here that they have a section for outage maps. You can type in your specific address. There's also information here for community resource centers. So if you do find yourself without power and you want to go to one of those community resource centers that PG&E sets up, this is where you can come and you can find out exactly where those resource centers are going to be activated during that outage, and then what type of amenities might be available at that resource center during that power outage. And moving on to the next tab, we've also embedded the Nevada County COVID-19 dashboard. We want to make this Ready Nevada County dashboard kind of a one-stop shop. So that's why the decision was made to go ahead and embed the entire COVID-19 dashboard. We know that this has been a popular dashboard throughout the COVID event. So we wanted to place it here to where it was easy to get to so you wouldn't have to bounce around from one browser to the next. You can find all the information you need right here. And moving on to the tab to the right is our feedback form. This is a critical form. We found this during the Jones fire. We probably got at least 100 folks that logged in and provided us really good feedback. Some of it was extremely helpful. Lindsay can attest that during the fire, she was actually going through and she was reading the feedback that the public was submitting. And there was a number of different times where she was able to take that feedback and incorporate that and make those changes and those minor tweaks. And then we would actually see somebody submit another feedback saying that they appreciated the fact that she took the time to do that. So again, we want you to come to the dashboard. We want you to play with it, get familiar with it. And if you have feedback, things that you want to see change, this is where we'd like you to come so we can capture all that information in one spot and we can address that. It's really easy. There's only 2 boxes. The first box is just a free form text box. You can type in the feedback you have. And if you're inclined, if you want to leave a way for us to contact you, like an email address or a phone number, you can provide that, and then we can circle back to you and let you know the status of your feedback and whether or not it's something that we're going to be able to address. All right, so we're going to jump back to the very first tab, Wildfire and Evacuation Incident Dashboard tab. After it loads, okay, I'm going to bring your attention back. When it first loaded, you probably saw a little slider bar over here on the left-hand side that popped out. I clicked on it and it opened back up, and I can actually pin it. This is the about and how to use. It's great information. I suggest that, at least on your first time visiting, that you pin this. You'll see this little push pin icon. If you push that, it'll actually pin it and it'll leave it there so that you can see all the other features of this dashboard page. We're going to go through this real quick and kind of explain what this is. You'll notice that as we scroll down reading through here, one of the very first things is a link to the mobile version of the Wildfire and Evacuation Incident Dashboard. During the Jones fire, we got a number of folks that gave us feedback saying that they couldn't figure out how to access the mobile version. So we've given folks a number of different ways to access it. You can come right here and you can click this link here that's highlighted in blue. There's also, if you come up here to the upper right of the dashboard where my mouse is, you can click here and it'll take you to the mobile friendly version as well. Or if you have a cell phone in your hand and you happen to be in front of a computer, you can activate the camera on your cell phone and you can hover it over the QR code here. And once that camera picks that up, you click on it and it'll take you out to your cell phone's browser and it'll take you right to that mobile dashboard. It was mentioned earlier, it's important to bookmark that. Once you go to it, just bookmark it so that you can get back to it easier the next time. If you continue scrolling down, it's going to talk about what this map's actually going to be used for. So we're going to use this to communicate current disaster-related information, road closures, evacuation zones, activated shelters. We saw during the Jones fire that we didn't have your traditional shelter listed on there because of COVID precautions. We weren't allowed to set up a traditional congregate shelter. But what we did put on here was we put the temporary evacuation points. These are the locations that people that evacuated from their homes could go to, and they could be triaged. Working with American Red Cross, they could figure out what the next step would be, where they needed to go at that point. So we're going to list those temporary evacuation points on here as well. This also gives you the verbiage and the definition of what an evacuation order, evacuation warning, and what a shelter in place are. We got a lot of questions and commentary about what's the difference between an order and a warning. Essentially, an order is an immediate, when we issue an evacuation order, we're telling the public that there's an immediate threat to life and that this is a lawful order to leave now and that we're closing the area off. An evacuation warning is when we're telling people that there's a potential threat to life and or property, and that those who require additional time to evacuate should probably take advantage of that time to get themselves prepared to leave in the event that they do need to leave, or simply leave. Just because it's a warning doesn't mean that you can't leave. You can always make that decision to leave early if you choose. But this is the time to start preparing those pets and getting your livestock together. And if you don't already have your go bag in your vehicle, maybe get your go bag, put it by the front door, or actually put it in your vehicle. We also have a definition of shelter in place. This would be an extremely rare circumstance, but we do put the definition up here so that people would understand what that is if we ever issued a shelter in place. It essentially is we're telling you to go indoors, go inside, shut and lock your doors and your windows, and prepare to self-sustain until you get further direction from law enforcement or fire. We put the symbology up here so that folks will understand what the different colors are for the different icons that they're going to see appear on the map. So we have the colors for the evacuation orders, the warnings, what color it's going to be when we start lifting and preparing to repopulate those areas, what a shelter-in-place color would be, and or possibly a rescue. And then there's information here on how to use this application, but I'm going to walk you through that, so I won't read that off and bore everybody right now. At the bottom here, we provide the data sources. And what we mean by that is, where's this information coming from? You can see that there's already information that's populated on the map here on the screen. What this is this information is hazardous wildfire conditions. So that would be your your red flag warnings. So we've all heard about the term red flag warning when weather conditions are such that it's very likely that if a fire starts, it's going to go, and it's going to go fast. This is where you can come to see that. And those red flag warnings will actually appear on the map. If I zoom out, I might be able to see if there's any red flag warnings issued for our area. Not immediately seeing one. We did see several of them during
Eureka, Bob.
Oh, was there one up in Eureka, you said?
Yeah, the North State, Northeast State, and then if you can go into Nevada too. They have one in Central and Eastern Nevada and Eureka right now, both.
Okay, I'm not seeing it on the map. It will basically be a large area of pink, very similar to the inside of these fire perimeters. It'll be a very similar color to that, and they tend to be fairly widespread when they do show on the map. I'm not seeing one at this moment. If you were watching this closely during the Jones fire, you would have noticed that we had a couple of different red flag warnings that went into effect during that time, and it became very obvious because the screen filled up with a lot of pink. We're also pulling data here from the National Interagency Fire Center. That's where you see these little fire icons. And if you click on an icon, it's going to give you the name of the incident. It's going to give you when that incident was reported and what the last update was that they received on that incident. You'll also notice that on some of the bigger fires, they'll actually insert the fire perimeter. And if you click on that, it's going to show you how many acres were last reported to have burned on this fire. So here we have the Loyalton fire. They're showing acres burned was just over 46,000 acres. This information was current as of just a few days ago. So it's kind of handy information. I will tell you that that information tends to stay on the dashboard for several days after the incident has concluded. So you'll notice that fires will pop up on the dashboard, and then maybe 3 or 4 days later, they'll go away. But then you hear, well, the fire only lasted a day. The information is not controlled by us. We're simply pulling that information down from that National Interagency Fire Center. And again, sometimes it takes several days for that information to eventually go away. We're also pulling down information about traffic and traffic hazards. We're also working with our local public works department right now. We're looking to populate on the map areas where they have temporary road closures, so that if there is an incident and there was a temporary road closure, people could come here and they could see that that was an area where the road was closed and that they may want to avoid that area. So I'm going to go ahead and unpin this. I'm going to collapse that side view so that we have a wider view here. So starting on the left-hand side, you're going to notice that we've got a pane here that has a number of different metrics that are relating to the fire. We start out at the top by naming the incident. When this dashboard is not active and the EOC is not active and we're not tracking a fire, you'll notice that this will just say Nevada County. But during the Jones incident, we went ahead and renamed this the Jones incident so that when you come here, you understand which fire it is that we're talking about and which fire these metrics actually apply to. So you'll see metrics like acres burned, what the containment is, how many personnel are currently deployed to that fire, and how many structures have been destroyed. We get this information from our fire partners. We got a number of comments asking us about how come our data metrics don't match other outlets that were reporting different metrics. What we tell the public is that this is the information that we get directly from the incident command, and we update it as we're updated. So we're trying to keep this as up to date as possible during a fire. You'll notice at the bottom here, there's a couple of arrows. So if you click on one of these arrows, it'll take you back to this section here. This was the main section that we had displayed during the Jones fire while we had actual evacuation orders and warnings that were active, because we want folks to see how many of those zones we've activated for an order or how many areas are under an evacuation warning. So this is typically the view that you're going to see. We changed the view once all of those evacuation orders and warnings have been lifted and we repopulated the area. We simply just switched the view so that people had metrics they could see when they first came to the dashboard. So that could change depending on what's going on with the fire. Moving over to the right is our legend. So our legend is going to show you what the icons are going to look like for a road closure. And you'll notice here that there's two icons that represent a road closure. And we got a number of questions about this during the Jones fire as well. What type of road closure is it? So typically we have two types of road closures. We have what's referred to as a hard road closure. That's a road closure where we're not allowing anybody back into that area. Emergency personnel only who are assigned to work that incident are allowed to go through that road closure or escorted by law enforcement. The next one is what we refer to as a soft road closure. This is where we're only allowing local residents back into the area. And we have a number of reasons for doing this. Number one, it's a dangerous environment. There's a lot of equipment that's being operated. The fire department tends to stay in these areas for days after these fires because they're doing mop-up, they're looking for hotspots. So we have a lot of equipment in the area, and what we don't need is we don't need additional traffic in that area getting in the way or endangering themselves. And we could also have a security issue. Like in the Jones fire, we had a number of structures that were destroyed, residences that were lost. There's still valuables that are on site there, and those residents may not necessarily be there 24/7 from that point forward. And so we're trying to limit the amount of traffic that we're allowing into those areas. So you'll see that soft road closures are going to be something that's common in the aftermath of fires. So if you scroll down in the legend, it continues to show you what the other icons are, animal shelters. If you were tracking during the Jones fire, you notice that we used this icon out at the fairgrounds. Nevada County's animal rescue team was out there working with all the sheltered animals. We listed a number of temporary evacuation points, so you would have seen this symbol over the Ready Spring School. It was over Nevada Union for a very short time. We also had it at the Grass Valley Vets Hall, and then we had it over Cottage Hill School down in South County. So if you're looking for information about where those are at, look for that icon there for those temporary evacuation points. We were also running cooling centers just before the Jones fire because we were experiencing that heat event, that excessive heat event. So we had a number of these cooling centers. So again, if you were watching, you saw this symbol with the snowflake on there that showed you where those cooling centers were at for the public. We're going to indicate road closures in hard red, and of course the fire perimeter. And if I zoom in here on the map, you'll see that we're still displaying what was the fire perimeter for the Jones fire. It's going to be that area outlined in red with the black slashes through it. And of course, our evacuation zones, these colored zones right now, because we've repopulated, everything is red, or I'm sorry, everything is green. So evacuation lifted. And again, this is an all hazards, all seasons dashboard. If our county was to experience a flooding event, we would list sandbag locations where the public can go and pick up sand and sandbags. We'll list those on here as well. And if you keep scrolling down, this will give you some sense for the size of the icons for the fire. Will give you an indication as to how large that fire may be. So I'm going to back out here for a second. Apologize. Okay. So you'll notice I'm zooming in and out on the map quite a bit. I'm doing that with my mouse. We did get a number of comments that came in throughout the Jones fire from citizens that were trying to use the map, and they were complaining to us that they couldn't see the actual roads, that all they could see were these big colored areas and that it wasn't super helpful for them. So we realized that it may not have been extremely obvious to some folks that this map does have the ability to zoom. And you can do that either with a mouse and a mouse ball, or you can use the zoom tool on the bottom right, and then just grab the screen and drag it where you want to move it. So you can zoom in and out here, or again with a mouse ball. And again, just like on the evacuation route pre-planner, you can zoom all the way in to street level, and you can see the names of the roads in these areas. So if you want to know if your road is under an evacuation warning or an order, you can simply zoom all the way in to that area, and you can see whether or not your residence or a business or a friend's house is under an evacuation order or warning. If you're like some folks and you're just not great with maps and figuring out exactly where you are, again, we have a search icon here. If you click that, it's going to open up an area where you can type in an address, and it'll take you right to that address. So again, I'll type in the Route Center. You should see a drop down popping up. And there we go. I typed in the address for the Route Center, and it took me right to the Route Center, and it centered the Route Center in the map. So you can see here that at some point, our Route Center was surrounded on 2, almost 3 sides by either an evacuation warning or an evacuation order. So again, that's a quick way to find your address, to be able to quickly see whether or not you're in one of those affected areas, or to get a sense for how far away you are from the fire. To the right of the search icon, there's a number of other little icons here you can click on. This one here is, again, it's your legend. It's going to show you what all the icons on the map are and give you an indication as to what you're looking at. To the right of that is a layer list. So you can turn these layers on and off, the closure points, the animal shelters, the temporary evacuation points. If there's just too much going on and you want to be able to turn some of this stuff off, you can feel free to uncheck this stuff, and it'll turn those things off, and then you'll only see what you want to see. To the right of the layer list is an option for different base maps. So if you select a different map, it's going to change the background, and now you can be on, say, a satellite view, or if you want to go to more of a topography map, you can click on a topography map. We have a number of different map layers in here that you can select if you don't care to use the default layer that we've shown on there. So that's essentially the map in a nutshell. Again, we encourage you to come here, even though there's not an active incident right now. That doesn't mean that you can't come here and play with this tool and start to familiarize yourself with it. Moving to the right of the map is a section where we've embedded 3 different widgets, per se. Lindsay will correct me if that's the wrong term. The very first one that's defaulted is Twitter. So we actually have embedded our Twitter feed right here onto the dashboard to help folks stay up to date with information that we're pushing out on our Twitter feed. And we don't just push out OES Twitters or tweets. We also retweet places like Uvanet. You can see as the top. If you scroll down, you can see that we've done several retweets on CAL FIRE. If you were tracking the Jones fire, you saw that Chief Matthias was on almost every day, if not multiple times a day, giving updates. They were posting those to the CAL FIRE Twitter. and then we were reposting them here so you can find all that information here. It's really cool. I used it a lot to keep up with the incident myself. Extremely helpful information. To the right of the Twitter tab on the bottom, if you click it, it'll take you to our Code Red widget. This is a really cool widget. I didn't even know existed until we built our dashboard. But what this widget is providing you is it's providing you with the last 5 Code Red messages that were pushed out. And when I say it's providing you with those messages, is you'll see here that it actually reads off what that was. And you may have to scroll in to see it. It's a little hard to see. But if you're having trouble reading it, you can always click on Listen to Message, and it'll actually play it for you. We'll see if I can get it to work here.
The evacuation order for your area has been lifted. It is now safe to return to your home. There are still ongoing fire suppression activities in portions of Nevada County near your home. Please check the readynevadacounty.org/mobile dashboard for Jones fire updates.
So that's the audio of the message that went out. Again, you can click View Email Message, and this will show you the text of that same message that you just listened to. Or if you're curious as to where exactly did that message go, what neighborhoods did we message, you can click See Affected Area, and it's going to pop up a map, and it's going to show you exactly the area. Oh boy. Here we go. You can zoom in, and it'll show you the exact area for where that Code Red was pushed out. Again, you can do this for the last 5 Code Red messages that were pushed out. So if for some reason you're signed up for Code Red and for whatever reason you didn't get it, if you have the ability to come to the dashboard, you can come here and you can listen to, you can read, and you can see the map of the area for that Code Red. And of course, as always, at the bottom, there's a sign up. So if you haven't signed up for Code Red, this is a quick way to come here and sign up and start that managed account. Or if you have a friend that doesn't have it or a neighbor, have them come here to the dashboard and show them exactly how to get to the Code Red sign up. It's easy. You click the button, it'll take you right into how to sign up for Code Red. To the right of the Code Red tab on the bottom, our last tab here is the Nixle Alerts. So very similar to Code Red, Nixle is the system that they use for their public emergency alerts up in the Truckee area. So of course, OES, we cover all of Nevada County. We want to be able to provide information to the folks up in the east side or to the folks on the west side who want to know what's going on over in the Truckee area. So you can come here and you can see the alerts that they've pushed out on their Nixle account to the public up there. And let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. I'm looking, I think I've pretty much covered it. Lindsay, did I miss anything?
Let's see, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. That was great. I think you covered just about everything. One thing, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, underneath of the left-hand sidebar, if you click an arrow to the right, we have a couple more kind of indicator widgets to give people a glance at how many evacuation orders we have, if there are any activated shelters and activated cooling centers.
Perfect. One other feature that will be available during a wildfire, unfortunately we weren't able to make it available during the Jones fire, but it's not something that's visible normally on the dashboard, but it's what we're calling the Mark Yourself Safe tool, essentially. So if during a wildfire we're pushing out evacuation orders and evacuation warnings, we'd love to know that you made it out safe. So we're going to place an icon on here during an active wildfire, and it'll give you the ability to click that link, and it's going to take you out to a quick little survey form where you're going to be able to put in your name, some contact information. You can tell us where you evacuated from and where you plan to go. During the campfire, there was a lot of problems with folks not being able to get a hold of their loved ones and their friends. Obviously, the cell networks were down, massive power outages. It was extremely difficult to get a hold of people. But those people that were able to get out were eventually able to get somewhere where they had access to internet and phone. If this is available, then you can come here and you can mark yourself safe. And hopefully that'll let our deputies know so that if someone's calling in and wanting to make a missing persons report on you, we can check that list and see if you're on there, and then we can reach out to you and see if in fact you are one and the same as the person they're trying to report missing. So we think that's going to be an extremely helpful tool. Hopefully we don't have any more wildfires this year where we have to use that. But if we do, we want to be ready in the event that we do. So that's pretty much it. I'd love to open it up for questions if people have any specific questions that Lindsay or I can answer about the dashboard.
Bob, this is Susan. I've been monitoring the questions here, and I've got some. There were some that were answered in the chat, and I'll cover those in a minute, but I'll give you the easy ones first. John Power is asking, the street sign posts in our evacuation zone have yellow tape wrapped around them. What does that mean?
You're talking about the street names on like a pole? In
apparently poles that have street signs on them.
I could not tell you. We do have the Sheriff's Evacuation Tag Program that's used to tag locations that have been evacuated, or folks can self-identify by tagging their own residents. I know that in the event that somebody runs out of those, the deputies would typically default to using crime scene tape, but I'm not sure why they would do that for a road sign.
Hey, Susan, Jim here. I might be able to help you out. I think that they're talking about the yellow flagging that we use to close roads. So not only did we have road blockades, but there was also flagging that kind of got strung between the road signs and fence posts and that sort of stuff. So maybe there's some residual of that we just didn't get to and pull off. If there's still yellow flagging on there, we'll try to send somebody out there and pull it off, but there's no reason for it to be there now.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It could be that if it was across the road, somebody picked it up at some point, so it wouldn't be just like dragging along the road and they wrapped it around the pole just to get it out of the way.
Yeah, that's what we did. Is we secured it to probably the road sign on one side of the road and then found some feature on the other side just to show that that road was closed, or we might even just partially taken it down to a barricade so that people could see that it was obviously closed.
Okay.
So it's just residual flagging. It should be cleaned up.
Thank you. We have a question from Flo F. Which road closure symbol indicates a hard closure versus a soft closure?
So the hard closure is going to be the round red circle with the white horizontal stripe through it.
And is that, oh, there it is right there on your, okay. And if there is there a soft road closure? Flo was wondering what's the difference, but symbol difference.
Yeah, so the soft road closure is going to be the yellow. Or,
oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's kind of a yellow circle there, and it's got like a white triangle in the middle there. That's going to be your soft closure. That's what's going to tell you that that road is closed to local resident traffic only, and we're going to require that those residents provide proof that they live there. So some type of photo identification, hopefully something that they have that has their address on it, maybe your vehicle registration if you're showing up in your vehicle. Something like that.
Okay, it even says soft closure there. I can see that now. So Bob Wilcox said, chances are I won't have access to a laptop or a desktop, need a more user-friendly mobile app. John Powers replied the mobile version of the dashboard worked on his iPhone Safari app. So I don't know if there's a particular response that you can make for that other than at least one person didn't seem to find the mobile app to be as user-friendly as he was hoping.
Yeah, I will say that it seemed to be hit or miss with the feedback that we got, depending on what type of phone you have. Obviously, this is a piece of technology. It's software. It's not necessarily going to be perfectly compatible with every hardware device on the market. I happen to have an iPhone 7 Plus, so it has a little bit larger screen. I was able to manipulate the map and zoom in and zoom out, and I found that I was able to utilize the mobile version just fine. But we did hear from a number of folks that said, oh, this model of this phone didn't seem to work very well. It was too cumbersome. I couldn't use it. So we understand that, and we've certainly heard that feedback, and Lindsay is more than welcome to chime in, but I know that we're looking at that and looking at ways to make that better for the mobile user. Because we understand that when people are evacuated from their homes, a lot of times the only thing that they have is their cell phone. So we understand that is critical, and we want to do what we can to help beef up the ability to put that information on most mobile phones.
And I know that one of the questions that got submitted in advance is related to this, and that was, is there any thinking toward having an actual app for the phone as opposed to a mobile version of the dashboard?
We've discussed it. In fact, just as recently as this last week, I was discussing it with the program manager down in our information technologies. There's a number of variables that need to be looked at. An app may not necessarily be the best way to go, but we are certainly looking into that because we had a number of folks that suggested that if we just build an app, that might work better on phones. So it's certainly something that we are looking into.
Yeah, just building an app is it's a whole different programming thing. Okay, so we have a question from Valerie Bush. At what point is a fire noteworthy enough to be added, and how soon might we expect to see it up on the dashboard if it was a fire that rated becoming on the dashboard?
Great question. So like I talked about, we're pulling information, and I'll pin it again up here and I'll show you. We're pulling information on all the fires. So if you zoom out on the map again, you're going to see those fire icons spread all throughout the state and the West, indicating all these different fires, these little fire icons. So if a fire kicks off, it's going to show up on this dashboard pretty quick. In fact, we were looking at it several weeks ago when we heard fires being dispatched, and it seemed like within 5 or 10 minutes of that fire being dispatched, we would actually see that icon populate on the map, and you could click on the icon and it would show you when it was reported and what the name of that incident was, what the name of that fire was. As far as the OES team pushing more information into this dashboard, it's going to be whenever the Emergency Operations Center becomes activated. That could be a number of different scenarios that pop up. It could be that somebody specifically requested that we activate the EOC to support that incident out in the field, that incident command. Or it could be that we see that this incident is growing large, quick, and that it's moving multi-jurisdictional, and that it's going to quickly overwhelm the resources that are on scene. Then we would open the EOC to help support that. That's when this tool is really going to kick into high gear, and you're going to start to see those metrics being populated on the left-hand side. And of course, if there's any evacuation orders that are being ordered by the Sheriff's Department or another law enforcement agency, we're going to want to put that information here, and we're going to do that through the EOC by way of our GIS team that has control of this map, and they can actually put those colored icons on the map for people to see.
And that's a really good point that I think I'll just reiterate here, is that the dashboard will be activated only when you're opening the Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, at the Route Center, because it's a big enough incident that the EOC needs to go into motion.
Correct. Yeah, those high-level features would be activated when the EOC activates. Otherwise, the dashboard kind of lives on its own now. We're pulling data from 3 different sources.
Right.
That hazardous weather data, the traffic data, and then the fire data. So it's got those 3 different data streams that are constantly running all the time, whether or not the EOC is open or not.
Right. But in terms of something like you had for the Nevada County Jones incident here, Valerie had said as part of her question, we saw the George fire reported on Ubinet, but not on this report until the next day. There was another on Highway 49 between Alta Sierra and Limekiln. So it seems really important that people understand that not every fire is going to be on this dashboard like the Jones fire.
Correct. Actually, the George fire is a perfect example of that. I was actually heading home from the EOC after a long day of working the Jones fire when the George fire was dispatched. I drove down there, and I was almost there when I heard the Sheriff's Department requesting to issue evacuation warnings. So we actually utilized the OES team that had not gone to sleep yet, and we were able to put out an evacuation warning for a small area around George Way and Alta Sierra. And we just continued to monitor that. Had that incident grown much bigger, or had it turned into mandatory evacuation orders, you certainly would have seen more information being populated to the dashboard. In fact, Lindsay was still on, and she was monitoring the traffic that we were using on our communication platform, and she saw that we were putting out an evacuation warning. And she actually did go in and she activated that same circle area around George Way, and she turned it yellow for that evacuation warning. They jumped on that really quick. The fire department did an incredible job in knocking that down fast, and we were able to basically reverse what we had done. The fire department mopped it up, and that incident essentially just disappeared off the dashboard. So it didn't require all that additional support.
So it just occurred to me, in a situation that none of us would ever want to imagine, if there were two fires similar to the Jones and the George became as big as the Jones, does the dashboard have the capability of having two at the same time?
So we can certainly populate the map to have multiple features on it. So you'll see those different fires and you can see those evacuation zones on there. That's a great question because we've talked about that. How do we handle multiple incidents with the way that we've designed the dashboard for viewing? We're still working through some of that, but that is a great question. But we can still use the map to show those different evacuation areas. So the critical information you're going to need will show on the map. It's just how do we display those fire metrics? That's where it gets a little tricky.
Well, we'll just have to decide that there aren't two big incidents at the same time. So.
Susan?
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, Jim here. So let me add some CAL FIRE info ground level stuff here. So the dashboard is getting some of its data sets from the incident commanders on the ground, which I won't bore you with the details, but basically they're getting fed up through our intel into NIFC, the National Interagency Fire Center. So that's where they're getting some of the data set, and that's what populates little red circles with the flames on there. So that's where they're getting their information from. And the mechanics of that are basically that me as the incident commander in my spare time while I'm not talking to fire engines, I can call either our fire information officer or our region intel folks and give them the information, and they'll populate the location and some of the basic information of the fire on the map. And that's what gets that little circle up with the fire in the middle of it, and that's what populates it on the map. So yeah, we can do several of them. And if I'm just too busy dealing with fire stuff, sometimes my phone will ring and it's our region intel that's been monitoring our frequency and watching the fire cams. And they'll say, hey, Jim, I just want to verify the information. I've populated the fire and this is what I have. Is this correct? So that's how that gets into there. And it's not as quick as we'd all like, but we pretty much have a standard in CAL FIRE that anytime a fire is approaching 10 acres, we send out what we call a ROC. It's really cool. It stands for Report on Conditions. So we have to send that into our region and up through our command center when a fire gets 10 acres or more. And as soon as they can process that information through Sacramento Intel, it gets to NIFC and it gets populated on the map. So that's the real generic version of how it gets populated there.
Thank you. Oops, let's see here. There we are. Norma has asked, does the Twitter feed work on a cell phone? It didn't seem to work on my iPhone on the Monday of the Jones fire. But it's not clear whether it worked on Tuesday or Wednesday of the Jones fire.
I'm going to let Lindsay answer that one.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Norma. That's a good question. I actually saw that comment in the chat box, and I did a quick little test on my phone. I have an Android device, and I was able to get the Twitter feed to work. So I'd be curious what browser you used on your iPhone, if you could drop it in the chat, and I can look into it. But otherwise, I'm not sure why that would happen. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Here's a question from me. Looking at what you have on the dashboard now here, Bob, and maybe I missed this because I was transcribing questions. Right here, or rather the box that says evacuation orders is 0 at the time, evacuation warning 0. What if you can't remember where the evacuation orders are for which areas and the warnings? Are those clickable, or do they blow up the map in order to see that?
So these metrics here would not be clickable. So you're not going to click on here and get any additional information.
Okay.
What you're going to notice is that if an evacuation order shows up on the map, it directly corresponds with the number over in the corner. So let's just say you have 3 different zones that have been identified as evacuation order zones. You're going to see that this is going to show that there's 3 orders in effect, 3 separate orders. So if you see a 3 here, what you'll want to do is you'll want to zoom into the area around that fire, and you're going to look for those different zones that are going to be separated here by the dark black outline. and you'll be able to click on those zones and get it more information about those zones.
So the zones are clickable. Great. Thank you. The Arnold Foreman had asked, how frequently is the dashboard updated? We were checking it regularly during the Jones fire and didn't know if the evacuation zones were up to date or were they lagging behind the real orders? Should we rely on the dashboard for up-to-date info during an incident, or is it better to check other sources such as radio? And Lindsay answered in the chat. I'm just giving this to everybody because I don't think everybody monitored the chat. Lindsay was saying it's always best to use multiple sources of information, but if you ever want to know when evacuation zones were last updated, simply click on a zone in the map, and that would be just like what you showed us now, Bob, and a pop-up will open. In the pop-up, there's an entry date for effective date with the date, and you're doing it right now, thank you, with the date and time next to it. That date is essentially the last updated date for that information. We try to keep the map updated as consistent with code red alerts as possible, but there may be minor delays in getting it into the map after the code red went out. Okay, thank you. Valerie had asked at the very beginning, is it a consideration to add Ubinet as another tab? Lindsay had answered that that was the first time she'd heard that as a suggestion, but you can take that into consideration. Let's see, I'm looking at some of the questions that were submitted to us ahead of time. What if my device has only Safari and can't handle Firefox or Chrome as a browser? Will the dashboard work on it?
The only browser that I have on my cell phone, and granted I have an iPhone, is Safari, and I have not had any problems getting the application to load and move around through the features. So
okay.
Was she specifically having a problem with the Safari app or the Safari browser?
It doesn't say.
If I may, just as a general good to know, this dashboard does not perform in Internet Explorer. So if you're one of the people that really like to use Internet Explorer, this might be a good time to maybe switch to a new internet browser. It should be compatible with all other internet browsers if it's Chrome, Firefox, Brave, Mozilla, whatever. And then, yeah, I think that's it. I just wanted to let everybody know that.
Good point, thank you. Here's a question. The list of emergency alerts / lifting of evacuation orders all read the same text, even if they referred to different areas. When evacuation orders were lifted, there was no way to tell which areas the orders listed on that page referred to. I think they should have been numbered or differentiated in some way. Eventually, we did get our own alert through code red that we could return home.
Okay.
It sounds as if when orders were lifted, the person who sent this into us weren't able to tell whether it was their area where it was lifted.
Okay, got it.
From the dashboard, yeah.
Sure. Again, and that's where the map portion of the dashboard can be extremely helpful. If at any time somebody wants to know if the evacuation order in their specific area has been lifted and they're afraid that maybe they missed the code red or for whatever reason they just didn't get it, that's where they can come here and they can zoom in and they'll actually be able to see. As we're pushing out those code reds, we're as close as possible trying to simultaneously update the dashboard. So as we receive information from the incident command that, hey, we're gonna go ahead and repopulate this area, we're gonna go ahead and relinquish the order, and we're gonna tell people that they can repopulate. At the same time they're giving us that information, our GIS team has already gone to work in building out that zone and getting ready to change the color from either a red to a green or a yellow to a green. At the same time, we're working on the code red message that we're going to send out, and we try to push that stuff out at the same time so that when somebody gets a code red message, they can then go to the dashboard and they can visualize that message that they got, either the audio or the text.
Okay. Somebody says, this was another question submitted in advance, during a fire, the dashboard needs to have more information regarding the current risk to areas of homes. And I think you can show us the wind part again here, Bob. When people have been evacuated, they want to know whether the fire is moving in their direction and where exactly is the containment line. The current dashboard doesn't provide any information in this regard. So probably this is one for both Bob and Jim.
Yeah, no, great question and great suggestion. I will say that there's always going to be a limitation on how quickly we can get up-to-date information in the dashboard, and I'll certainly let Jim discuss the fire perimeter and being able to map that and be able to put that information up. We get that information from the incident command, and with CAL FIRE in particular, they were great. Their mapping person was able to actually email us the files at night, and then our GIS was able to take that information and put that onto the dashboard to be visible as soon as we got it. But again, I'll let Jim speak to their ability to map the fire and how quickly that can happen.
Obviously, we do our best to update the fire perimeters as often as we can, but you know, not to be snarky or anything, but I'm pretty sure you want me to focus my efforts on firefighting and concentrating on the safety of our folks and getting the information to evacuate. So, I mean, I don't mean to be mean about that, but at the end of the day, there's really only so much we can do and only so much information we can get out about where the fire perimeter is, because it's always moving and it's unpredictable. So we do push out that information as quickly as we can. I will say we were very limited on this fire with our personnel that we had available. You know, unfortunately, we're going to have future fires, but if we do have future fires, hopefully it won't be when we're so strapped for personnel, and we'll be able to push that information out a little more quickly. Like Lieutenant Jacobs said there, we're pushing it out at least every night. I'd love to be able to push it out faster than that, but I just simply don't have the personnel with the technical expertise that are sitting in front of a computer to be able to send that stuff out. So we do our best, and I will definitely take that information into consideration, and we'll try to do better next time. And we feel the need for the information, but I promise you we are pushing it out as fast as we are capable of.
And but with your higher priority of putting out the fire, which is obviously what everybody wants, and that pertains to one of the other questions we got in advance of someone who said the most informative communications provided during the Jones fire were the videos of the fire master talking, which would be you, Jim, I think, talking in detail about the situation in detail. Please consider posting a video like this each day, only 4 minutes or less, or putting the information in text in the dashboard. And I'm just going to wrap up this thread by saying, the more technology we have available to us, the higher people's expectations are, to the point where they become unrealistic, I believe. And we have to remember that there used to be none of this, and people survived fires, and they got the hell out of Dodge, and they left early. So my personal opinion is, like, there's only so much that the firefighters can do, and everybody's working as hard as they can to get as much information out as they can, as fast as they can. And then we just, at that point, it's our personal responsibility to figure out what we're going to do and then just do it. So continuing on to the next question. If and when we might have to exit via Highway 49 or 20, will they be made one way leaving the county? A number of my friends who said they were signed up with Code Red said that, unlike me, they never got, oh, these are two different questions. Let's address the first one about 49 or 20 and whether they could possibly be made one way leaving the county.
Sure, absolutely. Simple answer, yes. It's always possible. It's always a consideration. It's going to depend on how many people we're evacuating from an area at any one time. If we need to do contraflow and we need to open up both lanes of traffic, law enforcement will make that decision in consultation with the fire department based on the risk associated with whatever the incident is they're dealing with. And obviously, anytime we run traffic in both lanes going in one direction, it takes coordination. So that's where we have to have officers on either end, as well as people in the middle, so that those side roads, those feeder roads that are coming in, somebody doesn't pull out thinking that they can go one direction and then they wind up on a head-on. So yes, it is absolutely possible. We saw that with the campfire where they opened up the Skyway and they poured all traffic down the Skyway. Nobody was allowed to come up. It certainly doesn't come without its risks, because at the same time that we want to get people out of an area, we also need to remember that we need to get the fire department into those areas. We need to get in there to fight the fire. So it's definitely a calculated move, and it's always something that's a consideration, but it's not always an option.
Right, which is right. You can't bring the engines in if all the lanes are full with people coming out, which is another reason to leave early. We live in an evacuation zone near Brunswick area, and we left. So even though we only had a warning. So the other question was, a number of my friends said they signed were up with code red, but never got the notification. So what would they do to try to work out a problem where they feel like they were signed up, but they didn't get a code red notice?
So there's a number of different reasons why somebody might not have gotten a code red. If they were expecting it on their cell phone was dead because the battery wasn't there, or if they happened to be in an area where they didn't have service at the time, they may not have gotten the code red that way. There's a number of different variables. As far as who they can contact, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Cummings, because Paul Cummings is kind of our in-house expert on code red, and he can provide some information as to how people can connect with code red to determine whether or not their account is actually active and whether their information is up to date.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And I would actually start off by saying, did the person get the code red test the week before? Because we had a lot of people who got the message during the test, but then they were not messaged during, the Jones fire, whether they got an evacuation order warning, which if they got it during the test, but then they did not get it during the Jones fire, that would mean probably two things. They were not in an area that was being messaged. So maybe they thought they were in the evacuation warning or order area and they weren't. Or Code Red just was not able to connect with them. And so I'll be transparent. Code Red is not a silver bullet. It's a tool. We've said this many times. It's a tool in the tool bag. And so while we would definitely want Code Red to reach everybody, sometimes Code Red doesn't have a full connection rate. So a whole list of factors, especially depending on the larger call, there could be a lot happening on the network, and Code Red will try to call back if it doesn't connect with the person. But sometimes the Code Red system just cannot connect with somebody. And so that's why it's important as a family that you have all your cell phones, your email, your landline signed up, so that maybe that one cell phone doesn't get the call, but maybe another one does, or it calls the landline and you get the email. And then, on top of that, having your neighbors as part of Find Your Five, so that maybe if your whole family and your whole household for some reason didn't get it, somebody down the street gets it, and then they come tell you. And then lastly, we've got the deputies out there with the high-low sirens alerting the community. So we have many safety nets for notification. Code Red is not a perfect system, but if you want to double check your account, I would recommend going to, if you don't have a manager's account, go to readynevadacounty.org and go to emergency alerts. And then you can create a managed account, which will give you a username and login, and you can go in and check to make sure that your family's emails, phone numbers are all properly signed up.
Thank you, Paul. A question from Linda Guthrie. What if the Route Center has to evacuate? Can the OEC function somewhere else, or the EOC, Emergency Operations Center?
That's a great question, and we were actually contemplating doing just that during the Jones fire. It wasn't that we felt that there was any necessarily immediate threat to the Route Center, but if you were tracking the Jones fire and you were watching as those evacuation order and warning areas were growing and getting closer to the Route Center, it certainly became a consideration of ours. So we actually reached out to one of our neighboring counties, and we asked if we could borrow real estate if we needed to pack up and move. If there's ever a silver lining with COVID, it's that we've all learned to leverage technology a lot more than we did before. We have used technology to our advantage so many times since COVID. If we had to, we could stand up a virtual EOC. There was actually a number of folks that were working from their house. In fact, Lindsay Gordon is on with us today. She was an evacuee. She evacuated for the Jones fire, and she relocated somewhere way over on the east side, and she was able to still do all of the support that she needed to do as a GIS team member to support this dashboard and everything mapping remotely. So we could not only move to a neighboring jurisdiction and set up a traditional EOC where we're all physically present, or we send people to safe locations where they have internet access that's strong enough to support whatever their mission is. So to answer your question, yes, we we always consider that an alternative, and yes, it is possible to move the EOC.
Okay, thanks. And just one more, and then I'll give it back to Bob to wrap up. John Powers had asked, other than the dashboard, how do we find out if there is a red flag warning?
Paul, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I was just actually typing that into the chat. So I use the National Weather Service NOAA website. I just put the link in there. You know, I keep that up and I just hit refresh, and you know, you'll see as the new warnings come out. Usually they're not putting them out with 2 minutes notice. You're getting a little bit of head start notice on that. There's also various apps that you can sign up for that will just alert you. So I have an app that will send me an alert for Grass Valley, Nevada City, Penn Valley. It just pops up on my phone and says there's an alert scheduled for your area.
Thank you. And I'll make this the last question. Is there anything like this for Placer County? Is Nevada County the only one with a dashboard like this?
I would say that Nevada County is the only county I'm aware of that has a dashboard like this. There are counties out there that have evacuation mapping that they're pushing out. But I would say this is the only one that I know that's unique with all the different features in it right now. I'm sure that now that we've had the Jones fire and ours has gone live, you're probably going to see similar products and platforms like this popping up, because it's a great way to communicate with the public and to put information out. But as far as other dashboards like it, I'm not aware of one that's necessarily like it.
And our IT department has always done a wonderful job and won many awards for the wonderful job that it does. So I think we can all feel proud that we have this, and it's better than having nothing, and it's fabulous. and let's all be happy with it and continue to put our suggestions into that feedback form that Bob showed us on the last tab. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Bob Long, our chair.